up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement, et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens, leur 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. 8.6 beer. Intense by nature. And Locage. If the last time you went to Locage was when the Habs won the Cup, it's time you went back to Locage. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro, the Sick Podcast. Some podcasts are better than others. This one looks like it has the makings of being something pretty special, I would think. I'm very much looking forward to a conversation with Jeff Gorton, who should join us in about a minute, the Executive Vice President of Hockey Operations of the Montreal Canadiens. The Sick Podcast brought to you in part by Energy Transportation Group, 8.6 beer, and Lacage. I'll talk to you about them very quickly if I can. If you ship commercial freight and want to impress your boss with how much money you can save, you get in touch with the logistics professionals at Energy Transportation Group. Email them at sick@shipenergy.com or visit their website at shipenergy.com. 8.6 beer, intense by nature, the beer for those who follow their instinct and live their passions in order to make their mark. And Lacage, if the last time you went to Lacage was when the Habs won the Cup, that's a long time ago. That's back in 1993. Well, it's time you go back to Lacage. The menu will surprise you. And just like that, I'm hearing we have our guy. And once again, here he is, the Executive Vice President of Hockey Operations of the Montreal Canadiens, Jeff Gorton. Thank you very much for doing this.
No problem, Tony. How you doing tonight?
I'm very well. How are you?
No complaints.
Where are you right now? Is that Brassard or where are you?
No, I'm at the Bell Center. Yeah.
You're at the Bell Center.
Yeah. You wouldn't like my internet in my apartment.
I hear you, but please tell me you didn't go to the Bell Center at this time at 10:04 just for me.
Just for you.
Oh.
Just for you.
Oh, well then I thank you very, very much. Jeff. Very nice of you. Jeff, you know, a lot of people know your hockey background with Boston and New York prior to the Montreal Canadiens, but I'd love it if we can get to know you because I don't know you that well either. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about your youth?
Well, pretty normal growing up in Boston. You know, just played a lot of sports. You know, middle, 3 boys. You know, a lot of fighting at home. You know, get the competitive stuff out. But pretty normal life. Pretty normal upbringing. You know, Bruins fan, obviously growing up. Huge hockey fan. Played a lot of hockey. Played football. Played baseball. Played a little bit of everything. So it's kind of how it all started, I guess.
You still get teased from some of your childhood friends that you're now working for the Montreal Canadiens?
Yeah, not really. I think they like it. They certainly like coming and visiting. They love Montreal to have some fun. So so far so good. But I think everyone enjoys the fact that I'm here.
How's Montreal treating you?
It's been great. You know, I love the city. The organization has been terrific. You know, fans have been very welcoming, and you know, I'm enjoying it.
Like Boston and like New York, no shortage of good restaurants, huh?
No, there's not, and I'm sure you have quite a few for me off air too.
I love it, and I'm. You know, the next question is when are we going to go? You tell me. I know you're the one who's a lot busier than I am. Jeff, when did you know that you said to yourself, I want to work in hockey, and whatever it's going to take to get there, I'm going to try and do it? When did you know?
Good question. Well, I knew early on that I wasn't good enough to play at the highest level, so I started trying to figure out, you know, another way. And then, you know, when I got out of college, I was looking around trying to figure out what I was going to do, and I just happened to go to grad school and be in a sport management program where kind of opened my eyes to some things. I got an internship with the Bruins and got a peek at what the NHL was like a little bit. And so I would say probably in grad school when I had an internship and I was starting with the Bruins, I said, maybe this could turn into something. Whether it was going to be in hockey, I didn't know. I hoped, but you got to be at the right place at the right time, right?
So I know a little bit more about you now than I did before, because I didn't. And my first connection with you, obviously, once again, I knew your Boston background and the Bruins and the Rangers, but I remember your first presser. You remember it?
I do, yeah.
All right, yeah. And so I have something for you. Let's go to it right now.
All right.
Hello. Talking about candidates, you already have one who made it officially that he's interested. You must have heard about Patrick Roy.
I've heard of him, yes.
You made the room laugh, and you made me laugh. I thought it was a great way of breaking the ice. And not that I want to, suck up to you here, but I have to tell you, I took a liking to you right away after that comment. I said, this is a funny guy. But at the same time, you showed me in that presser you were funny. You were a great listener. You were very analytical. It seemed like you were very businesslike. But Jeff Gorton has a sense of humor. You made me laugh.
All right, I got a new agent. You're my guy now.
There we go. Good, good. It's about time I start making money in my life.
Yeah. Well, you have to have some fun in this business too, right?
You're right about that. I want to talk about Kent Hughes because obviously it was your first real big decision. You bring Kent on. Did you have the same vision right away?
Yes, I think so. I think we were talking the same language, what needed to be done and where we wanted to go and how we wanted our teams to play. I think that's never really changed. We agree. We always agree on that.
All right. So having the vision is one thing, but trying to get there, you can get there different ways. Did you also agree on how you have to get to where you want to go?
I mean, there's so many different things that happen and decisions that have to be made. To say that we agree on everything would be a lie. But we agree on most things, on the way we wanted to build our team and the way we want to move forward and what we believe in and the character we want to have, the coaching staff, how we want to build player development. A lot of those discussions we had, we agreed on. Was it always the same person we agreed on? No, but it was almost the same philosophies on things.
A lot of people are watching right now via our YouTube channel live, on Twitter live, on Facebook live. So once again, comment sick if you enjoy the podcast. Kent, a lot of people wondered how this, I'll call it a double-headed monster will go, that you kind of work together in unison. How's it been?
It's been good. We're like I said, we agree on a lot. We have the same kind of vision for the team, but we're very different people, and I think we challenge each other every day. He's coming from a background that obviously I know a little bit about, and having dealt with that side for a long time, and partner up with those people to make deals. But his perspective and where he's coming from and his insight to players and having been really close to some really good players in the league, I think it's helped us as we're moving forward here.
From Kent on to Nick Suzuki, what was your first impression of him?
Well, I have to say, when I first got here, he was like the first guy I wanted to see because of the deal that he had signed. And, from day one, I've always been impressed. I tell everybody I didn't know how good he was until I got here. And the you watch him go about his business off the ice, and then you watch him on ice. Like the other night against Pittsburgh, his game was at another level, and he continues to get better. So I got really excited really quickly because, you join a new franchise and a couple things you want to look for, and you want to try to find a number one center. And I didn't know if they had one, and then the more I watched him, I was pretty impressed with Nick.
We're pretty excited too because Montreal Canadiens players picking up more than a point per game. We haven't seen that in a long time. I could be wrong here, but I think if memory serves me well, I think we got to go back 15 years. Alex Kovalev, I think, picked up 84 points one season. You said you were really impressed right off the bat, and then against Pittsburgh the other night, he was on another level where he made hockey look really, really easy. how good can he be? Like, there's no doubt, when everyone talks about you need a number one centerman to win the Stanley Cup, at least he's a number one centerman for sure. There's no doubt, eh?
I mean, I certainly think that now, yeah. You consider his age, the way he plays the 200-foot game, the way he rises to occasions, the way he makes people better. And like I said, from the moment I got here till now, he just keeps getting better. So, he's a point-a-game guy now. There's no reason to think that he's not going to continue to do those kind of things. So for me, yeah, I think our organization feels very strong that he's, a number one center.
Can you remember the night, the day, the play, the goal, the assist, the game, whatever, where you and Kent looked at each other and you said, he's our guy, so he's going to be a number one centerman?
I think I can't remember the game, but it's more to do without the puck. He reverse hit somebody, and Ken and I looked at each other like, all right, this is more than just an offensive player. This is somebody that gets it, and he was he wasn't happy. He was feisty. We weren't winning, and somebody came at him and he reverse hit him and dropped him, and it made us feel pretty good. We both have a pretty close relationship with Patrice Bergeron, and kind of looked at each other and thought, those are the kind of things that Patrice does.
Your hiring of Marty St. It wasn't unanimous, right? It didn't come without criticism, because some said, the lack of experience. He's an assistant coach or a coach of a Pee-wee team or a Bantam team or whatever it is. Yeah. Today, you guys are looking brilliant with that hire. I mean, the team is so fun to watch, and Marty seems to be getting a lot out of a lot of his players. What would you say to those critics today? Why you and Kent were convinced that it was going to work with Marty?
Yeah, I mean, I would think today there's probably a lot less critics than there were that day. But listen, it was a belief that we both had, that we agreed strongly that as we move forward, and if you can remember, if you're going to play clips from that press conference, I also said we were going to keep Dom too, right? So, I believe that we probably should, keep Dom to the end of the year. It just became a thing where, we decided we had to make a change for the best going forward. We did that, and the first name Kent and I kept talking about was Marty. It was always Marty. And, having history with him back at the Rangers, where he's raising his family and I was raising my family, and Kent's history with him, it was easy. We knew that even when he was playing, he was coaching. Everybody that ever played with him in New York always talked about Marty as like a third coach or fourth coach, whoever it is today. And his input on the game and in their lives. So I always knew he'd be a good coach. Kent always knew he'd be a good coach. We always agreed on that. And, of course, we knew there would be criticism and people would be saying, what are they doing? But I give Marty all the credit in the world. He came here last year without a contract. He did his own thing. He put everything on the table. He put his chips on the table, so to speak, right to the middle of the table, really. And he said, "I'll show you. If you're not happy, then do something else." And that's kind of how Marty lives his life. And that's probably the biggest reason why Kent and I are so attracted to him to come here.
I'm happy to say that I'm on record as loving the hire from day one. Yeah. Loved your hire and Kent's hire too, by the way. But I always thought he'd be a good coach, because I thought he had it and he got it. But the more I watch him, Jeff, and the more I see the way Suzuki's playing and the way Caufield's playing and the way Kirby Dach is playing and the way the young players are playing and the way they push the pace and the way you always have the puck and the way, the Corsi numbers are really good and the way you're the aggressor. And he does not get out coached by some of the better coaches in the game. I mean, you just played Pittsburgh for the second time in the season. Mike Sullivan's not too shabby a coach. It was your team that was the aggressor. And I'm starting to think that I was wrong thinking that Marty's going to be a good coach, because I'm starting to think that Marty has what it takes to be a great coach.
Well, I mean, when you think about all the things you need to be a coach, you have to know the game. You have to be able to adapt to different situations. I think one of the things, he's a great communicator, but I also think, he understands the player as well. Like I do believe, and I've told a lot of people this, and Marty will tell people this, when he walks into a room, there's nobody in that room that can't identify with him, right? Because he wasn't drafted. guys, there's some guys in there that can identify with that. He didn't walk right into the league and get all kinds of opportunities. He had to earn it. He went to the minors. He was healthy scratch. He had to be a penalty killer. He basically got traded. He got traded. He's been with other organizations, and then he became an all-star, and then he won a Stanley Cup and MVP. So there's nothing he hasn't done. So there's nobody in that room that can say, how's this guy going to get me? Because he's done, all that. So I think that walking into a room is really helpful. And then his personality. He wants people to play. He doesn't want to take the stick out of their hands. He gives them the freedom to play, but yet I think, the players are meeting him halfway because they respect him a lot.
The effect he has on Caufield, I think it was a couple of weeks ago where he said, listen, everyone knows that Cole is a great goal scorer, but you know what? We're going to try and work to make him a better player, to make him a great player. Cole Caufield's a much better player today than he was a year ago. I mean, you see him separating guys from the puck. You see him on the back check. You see him more responsible in his own zone. He's doing great work with him.
Well, he is. There's other players too, but Cole's probably the most identifiable from somebody when he got here. Had, I guess, the one goal, and then he's turned it around. He scores, quite a bit since. So, yeah. I mean, listen. Again, Cole can look at Marty and probably see a lot of himself and how he had to play as a smaller player, how he had to make it. And obviously, once he walked in here, Marty and Cole obviously felt a reboot and was able to, take off from there. So it's been fun to watch.
Every management team wants the best bang for their buck. They want to be as much under the cap as they can. With every goal that Cole scores, I'm saying to myself, okay, assign this guy already. So there's a bunch of people watching right now, and I think everyone's confident that Cole is going to be at Montreal Canadiens for a long time. At least we all hope so. So how is that going?
Yeah. We've had conversations with Cole's agent about when is the right time and when it's not going to be a distraction. And he understands where we are and that we want Cole to be here a long time. And Cole wants the same thing. So I have no worries at all about Cole and being a Montreal Canadien for a while. Not at all. We have a great relationship with his agent. And like I said, Cole's a huge part of this team and he wants to be here. So, that time will come, whether it's a week, a month, or 2 months, we're just getting to that now. But I would say to your listeners and yourself, don't worry about it. Cole's going to be here.
Should you want to attract free agents? We all know that Montreal, it's difficult to attract free agents, right? Some don't want to come because of maybe the team wasn't a team that was a Stanley Cup contender for the most part over the last 20 years or so. There's taxes, there's language, there's weather, there's no beach. You probably can't play all that much golf, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of media like me, and we're not always fun to be around. But the way you're playing right now and the effect that Marty's having on the team, if you wanted to attract free agents in the short term, is that the number one selling point right now, the way the team plays? It looks like guys are having fun playing hockey.
That's a great question. I think, when I think of free agency and what we have to sell here, I think there's a lot, right? I think Marty, the way he plays, his brand of hockey, as he likes to say, is very enticing to any player, I think, the way he allows them to play. I think the young players we have in this organization would be very appealing. But it's Montreal, and it's the Montreal Canadiens, and you don't have to look too far. I mean, I think back I could look every night and be reminded of how much fun it is to play here and how much how can you not get excited about the crowd here every night right now? And I think back to the last game of the year last year. We were 32nd in the league. These guys got a standing ovation for the way they played. It's a great place to play. If you want to play hockey where people care, this is the right place to come.
Marty said something that caught my attention. It's in French, but don't worry, I'll translate. If we can play the clip right now.
Arriver bon plus vite que vous pensiez, ça peut-tu continuer de même?
Je sais pas, honnêtement, on s'en fait vraiment pas que le résultat. Il n'y a aucun classement dans notre chambre de hockey. On n'a pas de classement. Non. On ne regarde pas de classement. On se présente.
So he was asked, did you think you were going to be this good in your record? And it's 8-6-1. And he says, I don't really know. But I mean, we We don't look at the standings. We don't have the standings up in our room. I've never been in an NHL locker room other than interviewing some of the players, but I would be willing to bet that most of the teams, if not all of them, probably have the standings up somewhere.
They do.
Was that something that was discussed, that this team was not going to have standings up there? And if not, what's the thought process behind it?
Well, I think when he got here, the last thing anybody wanted to see was the standings, right? So that was probably a part of it. So he did get rid of him right away. Carrying it over to this season, I think it just works. He preaches about today, the next game, and the standings. We all have phones. Everyone's got the internet, social media. We all know the standings. So I think that's the thought process behind that. But listen, Marty's different. His staff is different, forward thinking. I think they're very intelligent. They're making each other better. I'm watching them work. I'm very impressed. So I just think they have a bunch of ideas because they were all players. They all kind of get the player's mind, and I think they all just came to an agreement that the standings, whether we're in the top of the standings or the bottom, it doesn't matter. We're telling these guys we want the best for them the next game. So that's as simple as it is.
Jeff, I'd like to get back to Nick Suzuki if I can, because when the talk of the captaincy came up, I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't want Suzuki to have it because I said 8-year contract, it's a lot of money. It's already difficult to perform in Montreal. There's going to be added pressure. There's no doubt that he's a great player, and there's no doubt that he'll be a great captain. But I figure, you know what, why don't you give it to someone else for the next couple of years? And then he's got a couple of more years to mature and be ready and stuff like that. I was thinking Joel Edmondson 2 years, and then Suzuki. Boy, was I wrong, because it almost seems like Suzuki's thriving on having that C, and it's bringing out the best in him. How easy or not was it to make him the captain of this hockey team? Because I imagine you probably thought about what I just brought up, of course, but you must have been thinking he's going to pass it with flying colors.
Yeah, I think, he's an interesting guy. He has, for a young guy, he's very mature. We use this as sort of like that. But, I think it's his teammates, the guys that aren't here that were pretty successful here, the guys that are here, the way they looked at him, the way everybody thought about him in the organization, the timing of where the organization was at. And, had we named another person captain for a couple of years, yeah, maybe it would have bought him time. But, at the same time, I think Nick, at this time, where our team was, where we're going, his youth, being our best player, I just think it was, we all pretty much came to the unanimous decision that he can handle it. The players knew he could handle it, and let's see what he can do. So, credit to everybody in the organization, but guys like Shea Weber and Carey Price that have been around him for a while, they were pretty helpful, letting us know that this guy's definitely a captain in this league.
When you guys acquired Kirby Dach at the draft, I said to myself, all right, you know what? Here it is. They found themselves a centerman for many, many years to come, drafted 3rd overall, a big centerman. And, he was switched to the wing to play with Caufield and Suzuki. I think he's got like 14 points in 15 games, and he's like 12 points off of his career high. Bob Hartley told BPM Sports Radio earlier this morning that there's less thinking to do on the wing, of course, and he feels like Dach is playing more free. Having said that, I mean, is it too early to make the determination that he might actually be a winger instead of a centerman? Yes or no, and why? And if he is a winger, I mean, does it change anything, or would you guys have made that deal anyway, like knowing?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, but I think we still think of him as a center. Listen, if you ask Kirby, where do you want to play? You want to play center? You want to play wing? I think he's going to say to you, who am I playing with, right? And that's how people think, right? The guys want to play with the best players, and if you want me to play in the wing with those guys, I'm all in. If you want me to play center, I'll do that too. But I think we look forward to him at center. But right now, I think Marty's found something that's really working. He thinks at their level. He's got really good chemistry with those two players on and off the ice. So, why not go with it, right? And, we do have a little bit of luxury of having some centers right now on our team that can do some other things for us too. So, listen, everyone makes a big deal out of the face-offs and is he a center? I think deep down, I think Kirby's a center. I think he'll be fine at draws. He's working at it. But right now, the way the team's playing, the way that line's clicking, why change it?
When I saw him at center early on and he was having some struggles in the face-off circle, I said to myself, would be great for Vinny Lecavalier to get on the ice and maybe work with him. Is that something that's been considered?
Yeah, absolutely. Something we talk about all the time. He's working at it a lot. Vinny's actually, he's built some relationships with some guys on our teams. He talks to them on the phone all the time. So he's helping a lot. So, yeah. Okay.
Speaking of great young players, Kaden Guhle versus the Penguins. 2 games now he's played against them. I think he's totaled 46 minutes. 4 assists plus 2. Crosby's been pointless. He did a great job versus Austin Matthews at the beginning of the season and Alexander Ovechkin. I think it's safe to say that everyone in the National Hockey League, he's making a name for himself, this kid.
Yeah, without question. I think that, listen, that's a great pick by those guys that got him here, right? So, great elite skater. Again, personality like Nick, like low maintenance, just plays hockey. But what he's done and how he's come on these first 15 games, I don't think we'd all be lying to say we totally expected him to do that. In fact, I would say early on in camp, a little bit of slow start of the rookie camp, and then once we started playing games at the NHL level, it's been very impressive. And we all have some friends around the league, and the first question they ask me all the time is, "What about that Guhle?" So he's it's not just Montreal that's noticing,
but he's an untouchable. Or does that term exist in your vocabulary? Untouchable, touchable, or?
I mean, it doesn't exist on a podcast at 11 o'clock at night. But I would say to you
it's 10:28.
I would say that we have a really good player, and we all recognize the importance of defense and guys that can play against the best players in the league. So I'll leave it at that. Especially if the agents watching.
Yeah, I hear you. I won't keep you much longer, Jeff. So there won't be too many other tough questions. A year ago, if Canadiens fans were in a bar and they were talking about Arbor Xhekaj, and no one would bet that a year later that he would be on the team. So I asked you before, at what point you and Kent knew that Nick Suzuki could be the captain of this team, or he could be the number one centerman on this team. At what point was it that you and Kent looked at each other and said, I think this guy's going to make this team?
I think in the Maritimes when we were playing 2 games there, our last 2 games on the preseason, just that he's way more skilled than people think for his size. He moves really well. When he makes a mistake, he generally learns from it. He's very good on the blue line, walking in offensively. There's just all these little things. I think those 2 games, we were trying to think of a reason to send him down because we thought maybe it would be good for him and to play more and play 25 minutes. But, he carved out a niche pretty early for us. He does a lot of really good things. He's only getting better. So, right now, he's just thinking day to day, which I love about him. And but he's, listen, if you said, did I jot down on a piece of paper our lineup and was he on it in the offseason? Absolutely not, which is a great story.
I love that footage behind the scenes at the draft and when, the entire Montreal Canadiens brass is there and you're talking about the players. And Nick Bobrov made a great case for Juraj Slafkovsky. We all know how tough it is in your rookie season, especially when you're 18, especially when it's the Montreal Canadiens. Has he shown you a sign or two yet that he can be what you guys think he can be?
Oh, I think so. I think, listen, his whole package is something that's really hard to find. That's how we felt then. That's how we feel now. He's finding his way, and he's had his moments. But I believe he's getting better all the time. I think we saw that before the suspension. We see him getting better and better. So this is a hard league. It's harder and harder for these guys. I don't care if you're first overall, wherever you're coming from, to come into this league at 18, 19. It's so well coached. The players are so fast. There's a lot happening, culture changes in his mind. So I think he's doing really well with it. We're really impressed, and I do think his upside is huge.
Before you talked about, in Jack Guy's case, you're wondering whether or not you should send them down. I'm wondering, the American Hockey League team, I've heard in the past hockey people say, you know, it's great if you can play the same system so that when the player comes up, he's used to the same system. He's used to playing. He can fit like a glove. But can the American Hockey League team play the same way this team is playing, or is that not possible because you don't have the same players and you don't have the same skill level?
No, I think it's possible. They're doing it. They're trying to play the same way. And it's been a little bit of an adjustment, right, because they didn't do it last year, right, without Marty here. So they're making changes to the way they play. They're doing it. Yeah, you can definitely play the same style. You know, is there, you know, Nick Suzuki and Cole Caufield and Sean Monahan's? No, but at their level, they're doing it. And, you know, I definitely think there can be a seamless, you know, a way of doing it. And I think they're doing a pretty good job of it.
Speaking of doing a pretty good job, Mike Hoffman has 4 goals in his last 3 games. Took a while to get going, but now he's starting to find the back of the net, which obviously is great news. It's not going as fast. It's going a little bit slower for Jonathan Drouin. In Dadonov's case, in terms of production, that is, it hasn't worked out at all. Have you and Kent been able to put your finger on why it seems like they haven't been able to produce to expectations?
Well, I think, you know, the thing about it is we don't really have, I would say, a traditional fourth line, so to speak. You know, we're trying to, you know, they're offensive players, right? So there's only so many power plays. There's only so much to go around sometimes with these guys. So, you know, Dadonov has been a 20-goal scorer, you know, pretty much his whole career. And, you know, we're trying to find him enough ice time to recreate some of that. But at the same time, we've got a lot of young players that are up in those spots too. So you're trying to, you know, to work it all in. And, you know, some of Joe, Drouin, same thing. So I think Marty's doing a good job of, you know, giving them some time up there, and then he's got to give some to Slafkovsky to get him his ice. So it's a hard balancing act, coaching, especially, you know, we probably didn't do him any favors. We had like 15 forwards here for a while. You know, that's why Pitlick. So, you know, he's trying to do his best and give everybody ice time, but you got to remember when you're an offensive player and you're not getting, you know, you're not on the first or second line, you're on a power plays, it's pretty hard to produce.
That traditional fourth line you just talked about, that still exists in the National Hockey League, because I imagine you're referring to an energy line, a line that goes out there and finishes their, you know, their checks and stuff like that. Yeah.
So, but it, you know, like Jake Evans is a really good player and an underrated player for us.
Yeah.
You know, right now he's center in our fourth line. I think, you know, I think we're pretty good at forward and pretty deep. And I think sometimes, you know, Jake's playing on the fourth line, killing penalties. There's probably more offense if he had, you know, if he wasn't on this team right now. So, and I think we've seen that from him in the past. So we know that, and we have some guys. Maybe we're just, you know, we're trying to play an offensive brand of hockey where we don't have opportunity for everybody to have offensive chances every night. You know, sometimes you get 10 minutes, sometimes you get 15. But you know, guys like Nick and Caufield and these guys, you know, and you're seeing Dach, he's getting more ice time, he's producing, playing with the top guys, right? So we talked about the Slafkovsky pick before at number 1, but Owen Beck looks like he's going to be a good one at 33. He does, yeah. He's that's really exciting to see him in camp do what he did, exactly what the scouts told us he was going to be. Is exciting. So I feel great about the scouts coming in and putting the stamp on this guy. And when he came in and he was above all of our expectations, and he goes back and, you know, every night we're looking at his stats and following him and what he's doing. So he's got a really exciting future for us for sure.
Where would you see him slotting in? Like if you had to say second line center, third line center, are you more comfortable with one over the other? Is second a reach?
Well, I wouldn't put a ceiling on him.
Okay.
I would think that, you know, you look around the league, you see some of the players that you would compare him to. You know, he's definitely has at least a makeup of a third line center.
Yeah.
And I would say his ceiling's higher than that.
I want to end with something, okay? Be totally transparent with you here. And I know it's a previous administration. It's got nothing to do with you, but it's a very, very quick story. So back in 2009, the Canadiens had something like 8 or 9 or 10 free agents, but it coincided with the centennial year. And so they chose to get into the playoffs, and they went out, I think, 4 straight versus the Boston Bruins. And then in the offseason, they lost pretty much all their free agents for nothing. And I was going pretty nuts on the radio because those were assets that I thought that you could have traded at the deadline and you could have stockpiled draft picks. And ever since then, I've been on the bandwagon for the rebuild.
Yeah.
Now, a couple of years ago, I wasn't looking too smart because the team made it to the Stanley Cup final, right? But once they didn't win, then it gave me an opportunity to say, you see, I told you they should have rebuilt. But I love where this team is going. It looks like they want to rebuild, but I did not expect this team to be 8-6-1. I don't want to complain about winning here or where they are in the standings because the city is happy and it's a beautiful thing. But can you understand someone like me hearing about how good the top 3 or 4 players are going to be in the draft? Now, having said that, we're hearing it's going to be a very deep draft, okay? Maybe as deep as 2003 or deeper. But the top 3 players, by most accounts, are labeled as generational talents. And I'm seeing a generational talent slip away. Do you understand my concern?
I mean, I hear you, but there is 32 teams in the league, right? And so you're, even if you thought like that and it all happened, you still, things have to fall into place for you to be able to do that. I believe that winning and a culture of winning is the best way to rebuild the franchise around winning. I think there's a lot of young players here. There's a lot coming. What happens in the future? We have 2 first-round picks this year. We have multiple coming up too. So in the next couple of years. So I feel really good about where we're at that way. There's nobody in the organization that's talking about, having a bad season to get a really good player. Players don't think like that. The coaches, believe me, I watch them every day. They're not thinking about that.
No.
But I understand why fans do, and I get it. And getting your hands on a player that might be generational, what it would mean to the franchise for sure. But it's very hard to tell hockey players 82 games. Let's go get them the following year. You know what I mean? You
obviously don't do that. But in a year, for example, a year ago, where you traded Kulak and you traded Toffoli, and you traded Sherratt, and you traded Lehkonen, if you trade away some of your depth, chances are it's going to be hard to win games, right? So, I'm looking at Colorado. And McKinnon was drafted at 1, and Landeskog was drafted at 2, and Makar and Bowen Byram were drafted at 4. And Rantanen was drafted at 10. And in there's some other players that they went out and acquired. I think Kadri was probably 7. And Johnson was a former first-round pick. So there's several. Nichushkin, I think, was a 10 too. It seems to me that the teams that have won the Cup, and there are exceptions, had to go through a rebuild and ended up getting that number 1 centerman, maybe even that number 2 centerman, and many players that were drafted in the top 5 or 6 or top 10. And that's why I'm thinking that that's probably the best way to get there. Am I wrong?
Well, I think if you look back in the last 20 years, you probably there's something to what you're saying, but not always. But I also think if you look, Kirby Dach's a 3rd pick overall, right?
Yeah.
Nick Suzuki was picked where? 15, 16?
13, I believe.
Probably should have been higher now you see it, right? Cole, same kind of thing. So, we have a lot of those guys like Guhle. If you did a redraft right now, I'm pretty sure Guhle's going to come out higher. Like, there's a lot of guys that are top 10 picks that should have been top 10 picks here, right? So I feel good about it. Now you got Slafkovsky. There's another one. So I feel good about where we're at, where we're going. I do believe, Marty believes, everyone in this organization, that there is karma to the way you do things. You try to win. You have this culture of winning. If you let your franchise slip a little bit, and things creep in about losing and negative attitude around the organization, it's hard to get out of it. And I think that if Marty's brought us anything, I think he's changed the culture in there. And I think people want to play here. They want to be here. They can see the upside of where we're going. And there's nobody in the room that doesn't think we can't win, each and every game. So that's what we have. That's what, that's how we're going to build it. And I think it's going to be fine as we move forward.
So my very last one for you, so you can leave the Bell Center before 11 o'clock. It's a hypothetical. If the trade deadline was 2 or 3 weeks away, after saying what you just said, this team would be a buyer?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know where we'd look if we were. I would say to you that we're game 15. I like to go a game at a time and see what we're doing. It's a good question, and I know why you want to know, and I know why the fans would want to know. But listen, let's play it out. Weird things happen in this league sometimes, but as we move along, I think we're going to keep our eye on the future of this franchise. We're going to try to have a team that's built for the long haul, not one time. So we'll make decisions with all that in mind.
It's as fun.
That's probably a good way to dodge your question, but that's the honest answer. Yeah.
Jeff, it's as fun talking to you as it is watching this team, and I really mean that. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. It's so much fun to watch your team, and I have to tell you that in previous years, it wasn't always as fun. And like you said, they gave them a standing ovation last year. And they're pushing the pace, and they're being the aggressor, and I love offensive hockey, and we're seeing it. So congratulations on the style of play. Congratulations on a record of 8-6-1 after 15 games, and congratulations on the work that you and Kent and Marty and everyone have been doing, because once again, it's very promising.
I appreciate it, Tony. Thanks for the opportunity, and I'll see you out at dinner sometime.
Okay, and I hope we can do this again sometime. Not soon, but I mean, I won't take advantage, but before the end of the year.
Well, my wife always tells me I'm not for everyone, so let's let some time go by, and then we'll do it again.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Okay. All right,
have a great night. There you have it. The Executive Vice President of Hockey Operations of the Montreal Canadiens, Jeff Gorton. Wow. I got to tell you, I really, really like this guy. All right. I like the next guy who's coming up as well. Before we get to him, a shout out to Playground, who has over 600 machines, poker tournaments, and Playground casino games, daily promotions, and unmatched customer service. Why go anywhere else? Located just over the Mercier Bridge, only minutes from downtown Montreal. And there you have it. Joining me right now, as he does usually on Mondays, but it's a bit earlier. We had to push him. We told him, Eric, can you join us a little bit later on? Because Jeff Gorton's going to join us. And he said, sure, no problem, from Sportsnet and sportsnet.ca. Eric Engels, how are you?
I'm doing good, Tony. How are you?
Very, very good. Man, it's fun talking to him.
Yeah, I was one of the first people to do it a year ago, and I wrote a piece about modernizing the Canadiens. And I think a lot of people thought Jeff Gorton was coming to the Canadiens just to rebuild the hockey team, but there was a lot to rebuild around the organization, and I think COVID was kind of a stress test that the Canadiens failed. It's not necessarily that, it created all these issues that they had. It more exposed some of them that they had, beyond the ice. And, good on Jeff Molson for recognizing that some changes needed to go down. And this is not to denigrate Marc Bergevin. Marc Bergevin, to me, is an excellent, excellent hockey man. Jeff Gorton came in with a different wealth of experience.
Yeah,
in working with premier organizations like the Rangers and the Bruins before that, and virtually working his way up from an internship with the Bruins to becoming an interim GM, and then the work that he did in New York and the experience he had, specific to not only building up the team there, but the organization. And so I just think such a critical hire by Molson. No matter who was in his ear advising him about it, a lot of people said, this was all Gary Bettman and this and that. I mean, who cares? You listen to people who you trust that are around you. Jeff Molson has a good relationship with Gary Bettman as a Board of Governor member, as a key governor. And to hear him out and say you should speak to Jeff Gorton and go meet with him, if that's in fact what happened, that's always been the rumor here. It didn't take long, I don't think, for Jeff Gorton to convince Jeff Molson that he was the right man for the job in front of him. And look at what's happened since. There's been a dramatic change here within the organization, not just on the ice.
Yeah, Marc Bergevin's expertise was in player evaluation, right? Especially at the pro level. And yes, there may have been one or two that slipped away or that he got wrong, but for the most part, I think he had a real good track record. I thought Marc Bergevin won like the majority of his trades, which is a hard thing to do in the National Hockey League when you make trades and you're hitting at about 80 or 85%. But he's someone who liked to micromanage and take everything on his shoulders. And Jeff Gorton, I think, maybe likes to delegate a little bit more and put trust in his people and stuff like that. And I think maybe a little bit more managing people skills.
I think Marc Bergevin had a really hard time trusting everybody, widening his circle, and that kind of created a situation over a long period of time, where as more time went on, his circle got tighter and tighter and tighter, and therefore that created certain silos within the organization. And when you speak to Jeff Gorton, or when I did a year ago for this piece that I did about modernizing the Canadiens and spoke to Kent Hughes, shortly after that, there was so much talk about them harmonizing the different elements of the Canadiens and the organization off the ice. And that's what you need in order to be a healthy, robust organization. And that leads to inevitably sustainable long-term success that the Canadiens are trying to build. And I think if you were to judge these guys, not necessarily based on the results you're seeing right now in an 8-6-1 record, the most tangible thing that you could pull at to judge them on is how they have built out the organization and harmonized the different elements, and how they've brought in analytics, but those analytics people are working with the coaching staff on a daily basis, and the development staff is on site on the ice with the coaching staff every day. And so everybody's in the same room exchanging ideas. And I'm not saying that Marc Bergevin didn't have that type of organization around him where he welcomed opinions from this person or that person, but when it came to the key information, he kept a lot very close to the vest, because he didn't want people like you and me putting it out there before he could get to the certain people out there. So it's just different management styles. And again, I thought Berge is a fantastic hockey evaluator mind. Some of the moves he made were really tremendous, from pro scouting personnel. Even on the amateur side, they did a lot of work that the Canadiens are benefiting from right now. Their biggest blind spot was development, and their philosophy of development, and that has been the greatest emphasis of Gorton and Hughes and the people that they brought in. Maybe because A, it was a necessity that be the focus, and B, because they just have a different philosophy on it. And we'll find out over time if it's the right one.
Yeah, and I know Trevor Timmins took a lot of heat from some, but as Jeff Gorton just said, Kaden Guhle, that's a pretty good pick by them. When he was picked, I mean, that was a great pick by Trevor Timmins, who, if you recall, Eric, and I'm sure you do, took a lot of heat from a certain sector of the media here in the city because they didn't draft Hendrix Lapierre. Remember that? And Hendrix Lapierre had a history of concussions and neck-related injuries and a medical file that was pretty extensive, and the Canadiens were probably a little bit scared of it, but they knew what they were doing with Kaden Guhle. And we had, Andre Tourigny on the program probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, and who had a chance to coach him with Team Canada at the World Juniors, and he said that he was on the radio the next day, or he was on the radio that night, and he said, "This is the best pick the Canadiens could have made. This guy's the real deal." I know you tweeted out the amount of time that Kaden Guhle's been on the ice versus Sidney Crosby over the past couple of games. I think it's no coincidence that, the games went the way they went. I mean, Guhle was absolutely unbelievable. Is there anything that Jeff Gorton said that most caught your attention? Because there's one thing that stuck with me. And I'll go first while you think about it, was when I asked him, are you starting to think that Dach is a winger? And would you have made that trade knowing he would have been a winger? And he said, yeah, I would have made it anyway. But Dach's a center. Like, he didn't even hesitate. And Dach's a center. And I know he struggles in faceoffs, but he's going to get it. And Dach is a center. And if you ask him where he wants to play with the best players. And right now, the best players are another center, another winger. But it leads me to believe that when they go out and acquire more players, and maybe a couple of wingers, Dach's going back to center.
Well, that stuck out to me specifically because I was on your podcast a week ago and you were asking me about Dach, center, wing, and I was saying I still think they see him as a center, and that he has the ability to be a really good center, because I think he has that ability to make players around him better. I think the biggest benefit of him playing with Suzuki and Caufield on a personal side, obviously, is that he has the ability to play with those guys and produce the level of points he's producing. But the real benefit is that he's gaining confidence. And to see him assert himself and play at that level and prove that he is the player he believes himself to be will help him a great deal in his development at center when that time comes, because he has that ability to make players around him better, and he needs better players to play with for it to really shine through. And I'm not trying to knock some of the guys that he was playing with before, because I think it was a pretty good fit with Sean Monahan.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Sean Monahan's a center. He's not a winger. He has the versatility to play the wing, but everybody talked about Dach in the Pittsburgh win over the weekend, and Sean Monahan, like the details in this guy's game and the simplicity with which he plays with, and the way he drags the other guys into the fight, and just the way he checks the boxes at both ends of the ice. That was like the most undersold aspect of that game, but also shows you exactly why they had the latitude to move Kirby, Dach up to the first line right now, play him on the wing, because they have Monahan at center. And that might not be a thing that lasts throughout the season, regardless of where the Canadiens find themselves at the trade deadline. And I saw, you asked me what caught my attention. It was how Jeff Gorton sidestepped that last question you asked him about, if you guys are really competitive, would you consider yourself to be buyers? And I appreciate that he didn't answer that question, because when you have players that go to the wall and try to defy the odds and play as hard as they're playing on a nightly basis and don't care about the standings and care about the process, and that process leads to a certain level of success, you want to reward that effort. You want to be able to go down to that room and say, guys, I recognize what you're doing. I'm going to try to help you. Certainly don't want to pull away from the group, but I think no matter what happens, because they want sustainability and long-term success, and not just a one-off and a one-shot. If for whatever reason this thing took off to a whole other level and they started to see a team that emerged that could actually compete for the Stanley Cup, which I think is very far-fetched, maybe they'd go down that road.
Yeah.
But I think Sean Monahan, and there will be a chorus that will only rise in the fan base to keep this player around, because he's an unrestricted free agent and does so many things so well. I would suggest to you that no matter how well he plays, and if he continues to play well, which I believe he will, he's going to get traded, because he represents the best opportunity for them to recuperate the type of assets they want to have in order to build their team the way they want to build it. And that's, if for whatever reason Sean Monahan goes somewhere else and the door opens up for him to come back and sign here because he loved his experience in Montreal, great. It rarely works out that way when a player
works out that way,
but that's not going to get in the way of the Canadiens recuperating the best possible asset for this type of player. And I could be wrong. Maybe they'll sign him and say that the value to us is much greater than what it would be on the market. But if he keeps playing this way, Tony, I think the value is going to be.
Eric, he's a very, very good, very smart player, and he reminds me of Danault in the respect that they got to have the same smarts, and they play a responsible game. I know Danault had a breakout season offensively last year, but Monahan's best offensive seasons were even superior to that. So he's a really, really good player. When he talked about Suzuki, and there's no doubt, he's the number one centerman. I mean, there were some that had doubts when that contract was signed, and he brought it up too. He says, I really wanted to pay attention to him because I knew the contract that he had just signed. So he was really watching Suzuki when he got here. But he talked about the level that Suzuki hit on Saturday night. So Suzuki was unbelievable on Saturday night. He was unbelievable.
So
he looked like Sidney Crosby.
Like, what's the discussion around Suzuki right now in the fan base? Because the fan base of the Montreal Canadiens is quite informed. And, they're harping, certain people outside of the fan base are hearing about the analytics, people saying, okay, his shooting percentage right now is over 27%. It's over 50% in his last 7 games or whatever it is. It's completely unsustainable. He will regress to the mean. He's been a career 12% shooter. And, I took this to Suzuki in the room, and I said, what would you say to the suggestion that you're shooting at an unsustainable rate? And he said, well, what it says to me is I'm not shooting enough. There's games where I'm shooting once or twice a game, and that's not enough.
What an answer that is, though, eh? It just goes to show you that he thinks things differently than others.
It is because he's not denying the reality that he's not going to continue to shoot at close to 30% and upwards of 50% and score on every second shot that he takes. But he's not conceding that he's going to score less. And this is what I have always loved about Nick Suzuki from the first day he came to Montreal. And like the first conversation I had with him, which I remember very clearly, about some amateur scouts that had turned to me and said he doesn't play the game at 100 miles an hour and possibly never will. And this could be a knock on him. And he said, well, I don't need to play the game at 100 miles an hour. I'd rather beat a player with my smarts, assess a situation, wait for them to come to me and beat them, going around them, change gears, whatever it is. Like this kid who's now very much a man and has been mature beyond his years since day one of stepping into this white hot marketplace, knows exactly how good he is and exactly how good he could be. And he's known from day one. And like, it's a great contrast to his personality because he comes off as someone who is so purely like if you had a stamp of the Canadian flag, you could put Nick Suzuki's face on it. He is very humble. He will not go on and on about himself and his personal stats and what he's, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't believe in himself to the degree to which he can produce the type of hockey we're seeing from him right now. And I was on with you, I don't know, it was a week or two ago where I said, I strongly believe that this player could put up over 90 points in a season. And I think a lot of people have looked at him at capped out at between 70 and 80. And that would be the max he would ever hit. I don't know that he's going to sustain the type of production that we're seeing from him throughout an entire season. But my belief has never been stronger that this guy is going to be an 80 to 90 to even 100-point player at this level. If not for one season, then over several. And I'm not sitting here disillusioned or under the illusion that he can sustain a 50% shooting percentage or a 30% shooting percentage.
Yeah.
But he is really smart in terms of his shot selection, and he has a incredibly deceptive shot and a very fast release.
Yeah.
And the fact that he is both a goal scoring threat and a playmaking threat is a variety to his game that not a lot of players can play with from his position. And he plays both ends of the ice and takes pride in that. And he's 23 and only getting better. So yeah. I agree with Jeff Gorton. He is a number one center, and he's going to turn into one of the best ones, I think, in this league.
Well, this is what I know. I know that there have been great 1-2 punches in the history of the National Hockey League, obviously with Gretzky and Curry and Lemieux and Jagr and Hull and Oates, and the list goes on, and Trottier and Bossy. It's been a while since the Canadiens had a 1-2 punch, and Max Pacioretty always scored goals, but David Desharnais was his centerman for many, many years, and with all due respect to David, he had not hit that status. But Nick Suzuki and Cole Caufield are an unbelievable 1-2 punch right now, and it looks like they can end up being an unbelievable 1-2 punch for the Montreal Canadiens for at least the next 7 years.
Yeah, and there's a common trait between them and a common trait between almost all the prospects that everyone is so excited about when it comes to the Canadiens, and it's a big part of the reason why Marty St. is having the type of success he's having, because I remember him saying very early on, if not his first press conference, that it's the cerebral players that will really excel under his coaching style. And if you really want to look at the best assets of all these players, and I think a lot of people would look at Caufield and say, oh, it's his shot. It's his brain. Suzuki, same thing. Kaden Guhle, same thing, although his skating is obviously elite. It's a maker for him. Kirby Dach, same thing, the way he thinks the game. Even a player like this year who hasn't had that type of success and ends up in the minors and maybe at one point will come back is Rem Pitlick, and the success he had last year under Marty St. It's because he's a very smart player. Jake Evans, very smart player. He's not producing points, but man, they don't beat Pittsburgh without him coming up with huge face-off wins in their own zone against Crosby first half of the game, and just taking care of the little details and being a pretty good player for that. Like there's all these players, and the common trait among them is like their best asset is their brain, and like Owen Beck will fit into that as we come along. Lane Hudson is another type of guy. Sean Farrell.
Did you see Jeff Gorton when I talked to him about Owen Beck? He's just
how could you not be excited? You get a kid like that in the second round. He dips out,
who scored a hat trick on the weekend, by the way?
Yeah, he's not bad.
Yeah, scored a hat trick, Owen Beck.
Owen Beck also has a huge chip on his shoulder, which is always a good trait for a player. Like he believed that he should have been a first-round pick in the OHL draft and slipped out. People underestimated his offense. In this year's draft, he believed he should have been a first-round pick, and everyone undersold his offense, and nobody talked about his shot. His shot is a lethal weapon. his shot, which he exhibited at NHL training camp and through the preseason, is not just an NHL shot. It is a quality NHL shot right now at this stage of his development. And if he continues to use it to great effect in the Ontario Hockey League, that's a skill he's going to take up here in the National Hockey League, which I think he'll be playing in pretty soon. I love Jeff Gorton's answer on the player, that he has what it takes to be a quality third line center, but his ceiling is certainly above that. I think a lot of people are naturally saying, okay, great. If Dach is going to play the wing with those guys because that line works so well, then Owen Beck will automatically slot. The reality is he's likely to be a high-quality third-line center, but you shouldn't, if you're a manager or the executive vice president of hockey operations, put that ceiling on a player. And I think the more Owen Beck hears that with the chip that he has on his shoulder, the more he's going to say to himself, you guys will see what I actually am. And I think he's showing it right now with Mississauga. He had a feeling before going back there that the NHL, he was a healthy scratch for one of the games, naturally, just because of the preseason, he's not going to play every single one of them.
Of course, yeah.
And I remember talking to him, I was like, what's the biggest thing like you're taking here? And he's like, well, I was watching my junior team play, the other night. Like I was watching my junior team. This was at first intermission. I was talking to Owen, and I realized how much time I actually am going to have with the puck just from this experience, like just from playing at this speed, what is going to happen when I get back there.
Another very cerebral player too. And I think he won the Academic Player of the Year award too in the OHL. And he was the best faceoff man in the OHL. And you saw the behind the scenes coverage when they asked him, how good are you at faceoffs, best in the OHL? He's a very, very confident young man as well. Listen, Eric, I know your ceiling. I know what you are. You're a number one centerman on this podcast, on the Sick Podcast, because you make everyone around you better, and you make the podcast better when you're on it. So I appreciate that. Thanks for joining me tonight, man.
Tony, it was fun. It was fun watching you with Jeff. It was a great interview, really interesting stuff. And, I really think this is a guy who came here with a reputation of being very quiet, not a guy who likes to talk very much. And you got him answering some really interesting questions and giving some very thoughtful responses. He's a thoughtful, analytical guy.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily that everyone's going to get him out of that. And that's part of what you do well. And it was a joy watching that interview. I learned a lot.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate the kind words, bud. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
All right. Once again, the Sick Podcast brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, by 8.6 Beer, and by Lacage. Special thanks. I want to thank the Montreal Canadiens for giving me the opportunity to speak with the Executive Vice President Director of Hockey Operations of the Montreal Canadiens, Jeff Gorton, tonight for over 40 minutes on a Monday night, which was an off night, and he left his home to do it from the Bell Center. Wow. So thank you to Jeff. Thank you to everyone there. And of course, thank you to Chantal Maccabee for coordinating it and making it happen as well. Very much appreciated. I know you loved it, and hopefully we can have a couple more of those right here on the Sick Podcast. Comment Sick if you enjoyed the podcast. I hope you did, because I gave it everything I have tonight, and I hope you enjoyed it. And once again, if you're going to be watching on Google, Apple, or Spotify, leave us a 5-star review. That's our way of feeling the love. Until we do it again next time, we'll be back tomorrow night, same time. Actually, maybe a different time. It'll be at around 10 o'clock. It'll be after the game, but about 10 o'clock, we should be good to go right here on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. And if you watch tonight on Facebook or on Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely free, and tell your friends about it. Say, that guy, he's pretty sick, and so is this podcast. I'm Marinaro. Good night. Thank you, Montreal.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different, 8.6, intense by nature, and La Cage. If the last time you went to La Cage was when the Habs won the cup, it's time you went back to La Cage. The menu will surprise you.